Everyone, welcome to a great talk we're going to have today that's being sponsored and put on by Ty's Houston chapter. And it's going to be about everything you want to know about franchising. Before we kind of quickly begin here, just a quick backdrop for those who don't know. Ty was started in 1992 from Silicon Valley, from various groups of entrepreneurs, senior professionals, and kind of C-suite executives. They have over 15,000 members. There's 3,000 charter members who are the backbone of Thai. And there's 61 chapters across more than 14 countries. So kind of the goal of Thai is to provide mentoring, education, networking, and funding surrounded by entrepreneurship. So we're quite excited to talk about this topic. But before we do, we would like to really thank our charter members of the Houston chapter, as well as our corporate sponsors who are here on the screen. Now, I will be the moderator today. My name is Amy Henry. I am on the board of Houston Thai and the CEO of Unique Ventures, which is a venture builder of energy technology across the value chain. And Hubert will be talking about his experiences in owning a franchise and pitfalls, what to do, how to get in. I think before I kick it off, there are kind of three things or three pillars, right? You look at. First of all, when people are looking into getting into a small business or starting a business, I think a natural kind of tendency is to be drawn to looking at a franchise if you don't know, I don't have an idea. I don't know if what service I could provide or if there's a product. So I think the natural tendency is for people to look at franchising, right? Some of the reasons is that they may have friends who own a franchise, or they just kind of jump into it. And then it's really about how do you make an informed decision in this process. And I think with that, I just want to kick off with a couple of key stats, just because in this space of entrepreneurship, we all the time are talking about diversity. We're talking about women in business. And as I was looking at some of this, I was actually kind of surprised. And I think Hubert will highlight some of these things. I think between 2011 and 2017, Hubert, that female ownership of small business and franchises jumped at a rate of over 83%. And starting with kind of 2019, some of the stats that were given that was that more than 50% of new businesses are actually started by minority owners, right? So it's a definitely interesting space to get into. And so I'm going to pass it now over to Hubert, who's going to give a bit background on himself, and he's going to kick off this discussion. Off to you, Hubert.
Thank you, Amy. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay. So before I start, because usually I like to do this in a interactive fashion, and sadly, because of the format we are forced to use these days, which is online, it's not easy. But I would ask if you can go to the bottom of your screens and pull up the chat window, because I might ask a couple of questions, and it'd be useful and good to get some responses to some of those questions and get an idea as to what people are thinking as I'm talking through some of these points. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about my background in general, and especially in franchising. So I've spent most of my career in the corporate world, and a chunk of it in the tech sector. Over the course of my career, I have advised over 50 CEOs, and including at least 6 C-suites of Fortune 100 companies. And I've done my fair share of startups, all the way from small ones that have not gone anywhere to ones that grew to 400 or 500 people in less than 12 months. But I got into I started looking at franchising almost a decade ago. Over the course of the last decade, I have looked at many different models, many different businesses, like computer programming for kids, hair salons, for example, Supercuts, ProCut, Sports Clips. You see all these brands around. In-home care. We've got 10,000 people every day in this country that are turning senior citizens. And you've got to believe that they are going to need a lot of in-home care, and they do. Given my management consulting background, I've looked at business coaching, and I've looked at staffing services. My first franchise that I got into was almost 10 years ago. So, we'd had our second child who never slept. And given the job I had, I couldn't stay with that job. I was traveling constantly, working 80-hour weeks. So I quit my job. And I said, what the hell can I do at night when this child doesn't sleep and I have to keep an eye on him? And so I got into currency trading. And I got to tell you, it's one of the funnest things I ever did. I so enjoyed it. And I still remember, holding a child over here with a bottle in my neck and trying to feed this child with my hand on the mouse, making a trade at 4 a.m, right? But it was a lot of fun. In that process, a business partner, or an old business partner of mine and I, we got together and we ended up buying the franchise rights to half of Texas for a company out of California called Your Trading Room that had a very unique offering for training and trading in foreign currency, right? The ultimate goal really was to have our own brokerage, which, to me is like owning a casino. And sadly, even though the company, the franchise actually was starting to do well, our product was a phenomenal product. Frustratingly, there was a lot of fiscal mismanagement at headquarters, and just the week we landed our um, brokerage approval from the authorities, the company had to shut down. So it was a horrible experience from that perspective. Luckily, I hadn't put a lot of money in there, and I was able to come out of it okay. A couple of years after that, I started getting calls from this company, Children's Lighthouse, headquartered out of Fort Worth. You may have seen these locations starting to come up all around Houston. And the first 3 times they called me, I actually slammed the phone down on the guy. And the fourth time, I said, "Can't you buy a clue over here, dude? I mean, like, why do you keep calling me?" He says, "Listen, give me 5 minutes. I think you're going to like what I have to pitch to you." And I said, "I am prepared to consider this, but here's my bottom line to do one of these businesses. I have this much money to put in. I'm going to put in this much effort for 5 years, and if I am not pulling this much cash out in 5 years, it's not worth my while." He says, "No problem. You can easily do that." I did my due diligence and was pleasantly surprised. I decided to take the leap, get into this business. I wasn't brave enough to do this on my own, so I took on business partners. And believe it or not, we went from a standing start June of 2014 to cash flow break even by August of 2014. So in under 10 weeks, we were cash flow positive. And by the second year, just my 50% in that franchise was more than I was thinking I could pull out in a business in 5 years' time. When I saw that happen, I said, damn, I mean, this is not bad. And if I could own one or two of these, I'd be making more than a senior vice president of Fortune 100 company makes. Or not, I mean, that's the economics of in many cases owning your own business, right? About 3-4 years ago, I also got into another franchise called Huntington Learning Center. You may have heard of them. They're not very much spread out across the Houston area, but they really are the granddaddy of tutoring and coaching. They're a New Jersey headquartered company. They've been in business 43 years with hundreds of locations around the country. And for the record, I exited this business just about a week ago, as financially it just was not worth my while. Okay, that's kind of my background in franchising. I've been there, done that with many different kinds of businesses and franchisors, and we'll talk about this in the next hour. Okay, so what do we want to talk about today? Well, I want to start by dispelling some misconceptions in franchising, and then really start talking about what is franchising. Why should you be looking at it, right? Is this the right thing for you? If you're a budding entrepreneur who doesn't have a technology idea, like I'm not a techie guy, right? Even though I have an engineering degree and I've worked with technology all my life, I'm not a techie to go and invent something. So, I'm always having to look to take on somebody else's uh, idea, a business, and work with that. You got to think, well, is this franchising right for me? And how do you earn in franchising, right? And then how do you go about finding that right business idea, that right franchisor or franchisor to work with? How do you evaluate them? And then how do you fund and then get into this business, right? So with that, also what we'll not be discussing, we will not be talking about, hey, Hubert, can you help me make a decision here today? That's not going to happen. And then the other thing is we're not going to talk about the nuts and bolts of running an operation. That's the guidance and advice you're going to get from the franchisor and the franchisee network should you decide you want to do something like this. Okay. Now, before I get into my next slide, the chat window I'd ask you to open. Let's go ahead and open that. So, quick question: when I say franchise, what is the one franchise brand that comes to mind? I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Type in your answer. Okay, no more answers. It's pretty consistent, except for this one who said Sonic. You must love their burgers. Dollar Tree, okay, Popeyes, which I go to every week, pretty much every week. Eh? Yeah, the most predominant brand that comes to mind is McDonald's, right? And but you see them everywhere. Heck, when I lived off of FM 1960, just the 8 miles between I-45 and Highway 249 had 5 McDonald's on it, right? And an 8-mile stretch on that road, 5 McDonald's, and they were always full. So yes, McDonald's is the best known brand on the face of the earth when it comes to franchising, but people don't comprehend how difficult it really is to own and operate a McDonald's franchise, right? So let's start off with, for example, do you know what it takes to own a McDonald's franchise? And I'm not going to ask you to respond, but the starting point is you have to work 1,000 hours in a McDonald's franchise, flipping burgers, taking orders, all that kind of jazz. And very often you're not paid for it, right? So you work 1,000 hours in the McDonald's franchise. And then if you think you still want to do it, you contact headquarters and say, my name on the list, I am interested in a McDonald's franchise. And then you'll wait and they'll call you up and say, guess what? We have a new location for you. And by the way, it's halfway across the country. And you either take it or you leave it. And if you leave it, you're off the list, right? But if you take it, you're welcome to the family, and we'll do whatever we need to do to make you successful. And so you'll pack up your bags and you'll move to the city and you'll start your first location. But before you do that, you have to put a ton of money in. The money is almost $1 million in cash. And unlike with other franchises that will let you beg, borrow, steal that $1 million from other sources, McDonald's will not. McDonald's will look at where and how you made that money. They will look at the paper trail of where that money has come from, make sure it's your money that you're putting into this before they let you come in.
Okay, I'm going to jump in right there. The latest stat for McDonald's entry point is now upwards to 2 million.
Yeah, very valid point. So that 1 million is just for the operational side of it. It's not even the real estate.
Yeah.
The other million is most probably for the real estate, right? So, and at the end of the day, all you are going to pull out on average is $250,000 from that. So it's a significant. When I show you the data of other franchises of how much you have to put in, how much you can pull out in cash, you start thinking, these McDonald's franchises are not the best, necessarily to be in. Okay, so that's something to think about when it comes to McDonald's. Okay, so let's dispel some misconceptions about franchising that I've observed over the years. The first is, hey, I'm a franchisee, I'm a rich person. I'll give you a perfect example. There's one of our franchise owners in my children's lighthouse. We were at a conference, and then he's complaining about this guy. Hey man, we're all millionaires here. Look at this guy's talking about us. And I'm looking at him thinking, dude, you have one location. Okay, I know you're barely breaking even in that location. I also know you don't even have $150,000 sitting in any account that you can use towards anything else. So you know what? Forget about you being a millionaire. Forget about you being a multi-millionaire, which is what you're trying to claim you are, because you need to have at least 2 millions to be a multi-millionaire, right? You don't even have 1 million, but you're going around thinking and behaving like you're a rich guy, which you're not, right? So a lot of people kind of get into that mindset, and me, it's disturbing. And the reason it's disturbing is because they already think they're very successful when they're not. Because in a business, you have to put in the work, even if it's a franchise, right? A lot of people think it's a franchise, it's already going to be successful. It's going to run itself. No, all you've done in a franchise is you've bought into somebody else's business concept and model that has a very, very high chance of being successful. You still have to be there running it. You still have to run this and set this up like you would any other business. Other thing is, a lot of franchisors will also tell you, you know what, once you get the first location up and running, the second one's easy and we just multiply your profits. Not true. Not true. Give you a couple of things here. First thing you have to factor in that when you start your first location, you are involved in it on a day-to-day basis. It's your blood, sweat, and tears. It's your baby. So you're going to work extra hard to make sure it's successful. When you open the next location, you can't be in two places at the same time. You're not Jesus Christ. Okay. And so the thing is, you're going to have to hire management to run those places. And very often when it comes to these franchises, it's not like you're hiring, some hotshot MBA. You're hiring somebody who's barely got a high school diploma. And you've got somebody here who's not particularly business savvy. And so you have to put systems and processes in place that help you manage those resources, run your locations effectively. Okay. Also, when you have multiple locations, here's another example. There's a friend of mine, very successful in a particular franchise, comes, Hubert, when I had two locations, I was making good money. When I opened my third location, my fourth location, now total, I make far less than I was making with two locations. What the hell's going on? And when you dig into it, the thing is that he's taking the money from her first two locations and subsidizing the losses at number three and number four. And even before she could finish, get number three and number four profitable, next thing she called, hey, now I have 7 locations. And I said, how much are you making? And she says, not very much, right? The question to ask yourself is this a business that is going to make money from multiple locations or not? And if so, then what is the level of complexity that I have to think about when it comes to multiple locations? And then the other thing is, I'm sorry, someone just asked a question. Give me 1 second to finish the next point and I'll answer that question, right? So if I'm starting this business, leave something behind for my kids, a very noble idea, very noble concept. But my guidance is, no, don't think of that. And here's why. The first thing is, children may not be interested in taking on this as a family business, right? The second thing is, very often in these very local businesses, there is a flow to when it's going to grow. And then as the dynamics of that locality change, the business will also kind of sometimes go into a sunset or a decline. You've got to be able to think, well, you know what, this is a good time to get out and you want to sell, right? So don't go on with that, because then you get locked into a business that may go into decline and you have no intention of getting out. You'll end up leaving something for your children that is not as good as it was when you first got into it. Okay, there is a question here from Amit. So the question is, so when you're first starting, you're putting in a lot of time setting up the location. After how much time can you expect that it's run by itself? It all depends on the kind of business. For example, the Huntington business, I would say never. The most effective salesperson is you. On the other hand, if you were in the educational business running a mathnasium on a Kuman, that's something you could actually do pretty effectively with the right manager, because the business operating model is quite different. And that might take a year, that might take 3 years, but very often, like in my daycare businesses, I have managers or partners running things, so much so that most of my time, I'd say 80% of my time today, is spent being CFO of a up and coming social media company that is focused on the India and the Indian market. I don't know if that answers your question, Amit.
I'll just quickly chip in because I have clients that own Subway chains, right? And to your point, Hubert, they don't have someone, they do it themselves still, right? So they're still having to be very, very active in the business, right?
Got it.
So fast food, yes, you're still actively involved.
Yeah, I mean, I know of owners who spend their entire day, especially when they have a dozen different restaurant locations, they have about 3 or 4 TV screens, large screens up, and they have all their monitors, their cameras from the locations up on their screen, monitoring all their locations morning to night. Okay. So what exactly is franchising? Kind of, Amy and I have alluded to it in this, but the definition I've come up with is that franchising is the adoption of the brand. Is very critical. A brand helps, right? Always a good, positive brand always helps you, helps with the marketing and the selling of your product. You're adopting an operating system. Remember, a franchise is where somebody has already gone through the pain of figuring out what works Importantly, what doesn't work to make this business successful. It's those pitfalls you have to be on the lookout for, right? I mean, the fact is that 90+% of business startups fail in their first 2 years. The food business, it's 98+% of businesses fail in their first 2 years. So what you're trying to do here is take on an operating system and the guidance to make sure you have a very, very high level of success, right? And so you're adopting brand, the operating system, and the organizational support of a proven business model. And by the organization, it is not just the franchisor that's going to provide you the coaching, the training, the materials, and all that stuff. It's also the franchise network. You're going to form a network of friends within the network, other franchisees who have already been down this path before. And so they're going to, hey, dude, having this problem. Okay, you know what? Here's what you do. That is how you short circuit a lot of your learning. In my franchise networks, we've got everything on WhatsApp now. We just text each other, hey, what do you think about this? And in minutes, you'll get somebody responding, right? It helps tremendously to have that support system. So why should you consider franchising? We've already talked a lot about this in the past few minutes, right? So you're adopting a proven business idea. You're adopting a proven business model, a brand, and a support system. And you have the opportunity, based on the right business franchise, to take your success in one location and be able to multiply that. So you say, hey, got a hair salon that's up and running. It's making $95,000 a year. Now I just need 3 more of these to make this worth my while. Well, you have the opportunity to grow your business in that fashion. And here's a very critical one. It is much, much easier to land funding when you are in a franchise. Why? Is because you have been through the process of getting approved by a franchisor. A good franchisor would have aligned themselves with financiers, banks, or the Small Business Association. And those banks, they'll send to the bank, and the banks, oh, you've already been approved by this franchisor? No problem. Fill in these forms, take their template for the business plan, submit it to us, and we'll lend you the money with the right collateral, right? So all of this adds up to creating a very high level of success for you as an entrepreneur. Franchises have success rate in the tens of percentage points. McDonald's franchises, I've got to believe, have successes in the north of 50-60%. Doesn't mean there aren't failures. There are, but they're few and far between, as opposed to your startup or your own restaurant having a very, very high level of failure potential attached to it. So, is franchising something you should be thinking about for yourself, right? The first thing, here are some things to think about. The first is, well, you're going to be your own boss, which is good, right? You always want to be your own boss, which is what's kind of driving you to think about franchising or your own business. But here's the catch. You're still going to be under someone's kind of oversight or supervision, right? You're still going to have somebody from headquarters telling you, hey, do this, do that. Now, depending on the kind of franchisor, that guidance can be quite draconian, or it could be more advisory in nature. Right? That's something we'll talk about in a couple of slides. Second thing is, are you prepared to work really hard? People all say to me, Hubert, I work hard in my job. Okay. Now, that's not the thing, guys. Let me give you an example of my life. Okay. So, over the course of my career, I've been a management consultant. Management consultants typically work 80 hours a week after week, month after month, traveling 4 to 5 days a week, catching flights at 5 and 6 in the morning. That's not easy. Okay, tougher than that, I have been a wireline engineer. People who don't know what wireline engineers do, nobody works crazier hours than wireline engineers in the entire oil and gas industry. There are 144 hours in the week, in the 7 days a week. Wireline engineers, it's not unusual to work 100 to 110 hours a week. That's crazy. I will tell you, those jobs were a piece of cake compared to starting and running your own business, right? Today, I have a pretty decent lifestyle. I take 6 to 7 vacations a year. Okay, my businesses kind of run themselves to a certain extent. I may be putting in an hour or two a day of oversight, but most of my time is spent really with my social media startup. However, even when I'm traveling anywhere in the world, I still have to keep a finger on the pulse of my businesses. I still have to maybe sometimes get involved in making decisions. My staff have to always be able to get in touch with me. It's a 7 days, 24-hour job. If you're running a restaurant, damn, those things are open from 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, sometimes 24 hours a day, late at night, 7 days a week. You're always on the hook. So you have to be prepared to work really hard in your own business. We'll come back to the lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you expect and want to have? What kind of business can you relate to? I've looked at a lot of businesses. A lot of them were actually pretty good, pretty lucrative opportunities. The reason I just couldn't pull the trigger in them, I just couldn't see myself running those businesses. Not my cup of tea. You got to ask yourself, is this the kind of business I can enjoy doing? Is this the kind of business I can relate to? How much do you want to earn from this? Okay. Do you want to be making 100,000 a year or $1 million a year? Some people, people have to ask themselves this. I'll give you a perfect example. I was approached by this couple who came to me and said, hey, listen, we don't have the funds to finish out building out this franchise. Would you be willing to partner with us? I said, send me a financial projections. I took a look and I said, damn, this is just not making sense. You're putting in, $500,000 of cash. And after 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears, you're expecting to pull out 150 to 170,000 a year from this business. That kind of work and that kind of investment, it's not worth my while, right? Especially if I'm going to split it with you. When I thought about them, right? This circumstance was he's a police officer and she is a preschool teacher. Between the two of them, they were most probably earning about 100, 115,000 a year. Here now, they were looking at an opportunity to run their business, run their own business, be their own bosses, and make north of 150,000. For them, it was really worth their while. The question you ask yourself is this business opportunity really worth my while, given what I want to earn, given the lifestyle I want, given the amount I have to invest?
Hubert, before I just want to look back for some of the audience. How did you personally make the leap from wireline? I'm going to call you on this, right, into the education space, right? Kind of, as people may on this call or this webinar, thinking about how do I find what area might be suitable for me? How did you personally kind of go through that thought process?
Hold that thought, Amy. I'll come to that in a few slides.
Okay, good.
Okay. Maybe not so much my journey, but I'll talk about how people can make that leap, that change. Okay. One thing is, do you want to do this with a partner? If you don't want to do this with a partner you're not married to, you're going to end up, if you're married, you're most probably going to end up doing it with your life partner. That's one of the most difficult things, I'll tell you. Not in my circumstance. My partner, my business partner, my life partner, my wife, she has no freaking clue where my businesses even are. She's that uninvolved with them, right? When you take on a business partner, you got to find somebody you can trust impeccably. My business partners, if they came to me and said, Hubert, give me your personal bank account, I would not even question them. That is how much trust we have. That's not easy to find because friction tends to set in very often, and you have to find ways to deal with that conflict. You'd ask yourself, are you prepared? Do you need to do this with a partner? When I started my first daycare, I didn't have the guts to do this myself. I didn't see myself going in there on a daily basis, which is why I took on a business partner. And we had to go through learning pains, but we figured it out. And we have what we believe, or not what we know, is the #1 children's lighthouse in the state of Texas. I don't say in the country because the economics in other states are very different. And we'll talk about that as well in a couple of slides. Justin has a question about royalties. We'll come to that. Hold that thought. We'll come to that. Okay. So do you want to do this with a spouse? Very difficult to do this with a spouse, especially if both are at the center of the location every day. You've got the husband giving the managers and the staff one direction, and if they are not in sync with your spouse, the spouse ends up giving different direction, and that creates a lot of problems, a lot of conflict. Just something to think about here. And finally, do you have the funds to do this? We've talked about that. I'm sorry, and the finally on this is, do you have money on the side, or do you have income maybe from a spouse or savings where you can support yourself as you're doing the startup? Remember, when you're starting off, not everybody can go from a standing start to cash flow break even in 10 weeks. Sometimes it may take a year or two or maybe longer to break even. You've got to be able to support yourself while you're building out your business, right? Okay. So in the daycare, in the franchise business, how do you earn? Well, at least in my experience, there are 4 ways you earn. One is your cash flow, right? You're going to take cash out of the business. So you start the business and you start making a profit, and you got to start putting some money away in your bank account, because you're going to have to keep some reserves for working capital, or emergency repairs or replacement of things. And then you're going to have to accrue for your taxes, whether it's your income taxes, your real estate taxes, what we call rendition taxes. Right? For most of you who have no idea what rendition taxes, believe me, that comes out of nowhere and bites you in the butt. You'll get a tax bill. Hey, you've got computers and you've got furniture that are worth $30,000, so you owe us X amount of money. It's like, what the heck? I didn't even know those things got taxed. You get taxed on everything you've got to run your business. Okay. Okay. Next thing is business write-offs. Not very kosher. This is not a very kosher category. Amy, who has her own CPA firm, officially she'd say, no, you're not supposed to do that. Well, the fact is that take a doctor who's in business for themselves. They'll write pretty much every business meal, maybe their groceries, some trips. They'll write them all off on their businesses. If you've got a business that buys a lot of stuff from Walmart or Kroger or Sam's Club, guess what? When you go, you buy them, buy those things for your family, you'll throw some things onto that. Guess what happens in that process? You just bought yourself a average 33 to 35% discount on those products, right? You go to Kroger and load up on your week's groceries, just got 33% off on them. Okay, it's not a huge amount, but it all adds up. The other categories, the next two categories, are very often not thought about. It's the equity you're building in the business. There are two components largely for that equity. One is the equity that comes in with your cash flow, right? So if you've got a successful business where you're putting out about 200 to 250,000 a year from that business, and then you've got your, other components of the EBITDA, which I'll get to, right? The EBITDA, you can sell that. Typically, you can sell that to somebody who wants to take on your business for about 3 to 5 times your EBITDA. So if you've got a business doing EBITDA about 250 a year, you can easily sell that when you decide you want to get out for about 750 to $1 million. You've built some equity over there. The other place you build a tremendous amount of equity is if you have a business that has a lot of capital assets, especially if you have a real estate business. A daycare, for example, is a real estate business. It's a multi-million-dollar real estate business. You're building equity in that is being paid for by the business. You also, if you build it yourself, you're building a lot of equity that someday, if you decide to sell the whole thing, you could net a decent multiplier of 7 figures in that as well. Okay. And then finally, it's the EBITDA, right, of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. This adds up to quite a lot. You ask how much? Well, if you have a real estate, a business that you put up a building, you're allowed to take something called accelerated depreciation. Between your accelerated depreciation in your first 2 years and your interest deduction, you can literally earn back your entire cash investment in the first 2 to 3 years. Right? You put in cash, in 2 to 3 years, you got it all back, and guess what? You can take that money and start your next location. Right? Somebody was asking, when can I start my next location? Well, there's your answer. You generally will be thinking about starting your next location in your second year, maybe your third year. That's kind of rule of thumb of what I've seen across many, many different franchise systems. Okay, so don't underestimate the star of EBITDA. It is a significant portion of your bottom line, especially if you've got income coming from other sources. And what it does, it creates a very, very effective tax shield for your income. Every dollar you save in taxes is a dollar earned. So how much can you make in these businesses, right? Here's a sampling. Hair salons, you'll make anywhere from 25 or nothing, quite frankly. There's a big chunk of hair salons that may earn nothing. The top quartile will make a little over $100,000 a year. Tutoring, coaching, on average, they'll do about 500,000 revenue, 100 to 200,000. Cleaning, which are like janitorial, and now in the age of COVID, we're seeing a lot of these, biological kind of cleaning services come up. Those are also making a decent amount of money. If you have a master janitorial business, you can make much more. Senior care, we've got 10,000 people a day turning old, turning into senior citizens. And you would think these are the people who actually have money and they spend. Well, the answer is they also are scared. These people are living on fixed income, and so they're very tight-fisted. Okay, they do need care, and so that is, you see a lot of people going into the in-home care market. Staffing franchises, these can be very, very lucrative. The reason they're very lucrative is what happens, the franchisor actually goes and gets master franchises with large companies that may have a regional or national presence, and they'll come to the franchise and guess what? We got this big contract with this national company, and you, the franchise network, are going to fulfill it. It can be quite lucrative. Daycares also can be very lucrative. I mean, I have seen many franchises make north of $1 million in profit from just one location. Then you've got the food franchises. So, we talked about McDonald's. Look at how McDonald's is faring in comparison, right? So a lot of these franchises are not making a lot if you just have one location. Look at Subway. On average, they're pulling out maybe 40,000. So you've got to have a lot of Subways if you want to start making good income. The one I have that does seem to have a pretty good return, and I don't know why there are such few facilities, why there's such few locations around Houston, is Nothing Bun Cakes. I've looked at it. My favorite cake. It's my go-to for a dessert, right? Even for birthdays, it's Nothing Bun Cakes. They have a brilliant model, very few ingredients, very few employees. I've never been to a Nothing Bun Cakes where there isn't a line that's out the door. Fantastic concept. So, hey guys, if you're looking for an idea, it's maybe something. And I know the owners rarely go in. They don't spend much time in their locations. So, pretty good idea to think about. Okay, so we've talked about why you may want to think about franchising. We've talked about what you can earn from a franchise. Let's now switch gears. Sorry, there's a question here. The second column, average revenue. Yes, the second column is average revenue, and the range of profits I've given is kind of my observation and my research of what these kinds of businesses generally pull out. Now, finding that right franchise business, let's switch gears and say, how do you go about looking for the right opportunity? How do you go about evaluating the right opportunity? The first thing over here is you're going to do your research. Okay? Here's an interesting fact. Most franchisees, when you ask them why and how you got into that, they say, oh, I got into this because my the family member or friend was doing it. Here's an interesting thing. They would never have looked at other franchise concepts or business ideas, and they won't even look at other franchise brands within that. They just make a leap of faith into this one idea and one brand. That's the funny thing. That's strange, right? You jump into that. So do your research. There are tons and tons of websites out there with lots of very good information about franchising. That information can be quite overwhelming. And my guidance is to short circuit that process and get the advice of someone who does this for a living. Look at franchise brokers. Put that thought on hold. I'm going to spend a little more time talking about engaging with franchise brokers on the next slide. So, do your research. My guidance to you, consider many different business concepts and business ideas. Remember I talked about, is this something you want to do? Is this something you can afford? Is this something you can relate to? Is this something that presents an opportunity in your locality or your market? Think about all those things. And then once you narrow it down, one or two concepts, make a laundry list of all the players that are franchisors in that market. Some of them will be very established and mature. And guess what? They may not be offering franchises in your neck of the woods. They may require you to relocate and you say, no, I'm not prepared to do that. Some of them may say this is a ground floor opportunity. And you got to ask yourself, is this something I really want to get into? But do your investigation, talk to different franchisors within that business idea. And remember I said, get comfortable with the concept, but not just comfortable with the concept, you're going to have to get comfortable with the franchisor because they're your business partner, they're your guidance, they're your, hey, I'm going to crack the whip on you people. And we'll talk about that as well in a few slides. Think about the money. Do I have the money to get into this? Is this financeable? If I don't have enough of funds, is this financeable? But also the big pitfall is the franchisor fees. This is a crazy area, okay? Here's what I have noticed. There are lots and lots of new franchises that have lowered the barrier to franchise entry. They've made the entry level fees ridiculously low, 10,000, 20,000. I warn you about that, guys. I caution you about that. Why? Because when you have such low entry fees, they will take anybody and everybody into the network and the system. Why? Because a franchisor doesn't make money from whether you're successful or not. They make their money from you based on your gross. They make money from you by charging you fees for your royalties, percent ad fund, percent advertising fee, or marketing fee, fee, computer services fee, coaching fee, all those kinds of fees. And all of a sudden you find, damn, I'm paying these guys a lot of money, even though I'm not profitable, right? So they lower the barrier to entry, but they'll gouge you on the back end. You also find that your franchisee network is with a lot of not so smart people, because not so smart people can find a way to scrape together 10 or 20 or $1,000. When you look at a well-established franchise that has a significant barrier to entry, that's where you're going to get good guidance. That's where your chance of being successful, more successful, goes up. That's where your franchisee network is your franchising network. You're going to have pretty smart, sophisticated people giving you guidance. Remind me again, Amy, what was the question about royalty?
Real quick. The previous one was they were wanting to know what kind of royalties should people expect.
The royalties, yeah.
The brand,
So the royalties vary. They can be anywhere from low 5, which is rare. Typically, mid-range is 5 to 7% of your gross, not your cost. Remember, it's your gross revenue, right? When you factor in your costs, 5 to 7% or 5 to 9% is your royalties. Typically, you're going to pay an ad fee of 2%. You may have a co-op fee of 1 to 2%. And then your other fees like training and all that stuff can be, each of them can be a few $100s a month. Okay, a lot of franchisers will also have a minimum you have to pay. If you don't make a certain minimum threshold, they'll still charge you minimum threshold in terms of a dollar amount, a flat fee. So before you know it, your costs related to your franchisor can be 20+%, can be 20+% of your cost can be going to your franchisor. So pay close attention to that, guys. Okay, so you looked at it, you said, okay, these are the franchisers I really liked. I want to get into this. Now, how you go about building your local plan? And you're going to build your plan, right? You're never going to be successful building out a business without a plan. First thing you're going to do is market research. But your market research is not the kind of market research you do in a Fortune 500 company. You're not going to say, oh, the industry is $30 billion and the demographics of the people. No, that's not how the research works when you're doing a small local business. It's going to be ground level. You're going to take a map. You're going to take the GPS coordinates of the locality you're thinking of opening a business in, and you're going to look at the demographics of the people in the locality. You're going to look at their earning potential. You're going to look at those trends. You're going to look at the competition. You're even going to, very often when you're driving down the road, you may see a couple of wires across the road, right? You're going to do that. You're going to see how much of traffic, because that's measuring the traffic flow in front of that location in the morning, at morning rush hour, and in the evening at the evening rush hour, and then throughout the day, what is the traffic flow for this business? For example, if you're looking at a hair salon, you want to be on the side of the street that is catering to people returning home from work. Why? Because people go for haircuts very often in the evenings when they're coming back from work. You want to look, at weekend traffic, because that's when people go and do most of their haircuts, right? So those are the kinds of quirks you're going to have to look at about your local business. Then you're going to have to look at the operating model. Is this model working? Is this a good one? And feed that into your revenue plan. Project your revenue plan out and see how much cash are you going to need to be successful in business. What is your break-even number? Right? In the daycare business, what are the number of enrollments I need to have to be successful, to break even? In the hair salon business, how many customers do I need to see a week to break even? In a food business, what is the average ticket I need to have, and how many customers should I be serving per week to break even? That's the kind of thing you have to break it down to. And of course, okay, I make so much from one location. If can I get multiple locations in my area? Or am I going to have to travel 30 miles for my next location? And is that something I'm prepared to do? As you go through this due diligence, I will provide that information also in towards the end. Okay. And the due diligence, you're going to do due diligence on the franchisor, right? And we'll come to that as well. And then when you're doing this due diligence, the best information you're going to get is by actually going and meeting with and interviewing existing franchisees. Now, typically, the franchisor will give you the names, the contacts for 2 or 3 franchisees. They're going to give you the good ones, which is important, right? You want to align yourself with those who are successful, but also ask them to give you contacts for those who are not so good. I'll give you an example. I was looking to buy into some franchises, and the franchisor was offering me 2 very good locations they had seized from an underperforming franchisee. Well, that sounds good. But I want to talk to this franchisee who seems to have some very good location, but doesn't seem to be doing well. I called the guy up and I said, well, tell me, why are these not doing so well? And of course, he bitched and moaned about the headquarters people. So basically, these 2 locations you have in what I consider pretty good localities, up and coming, growing localities in Katy and the Woodlands are not doing so well because of these headquarters thing. Yes, all the 4 locations I'm managing are not doing well. So wait a second, you own 2, but you've got 4 you're managing? He said, yeah, I'm managing 2 more for somebody else. Those are also not doing well. That doesn't make sense. But as I dug into the conversation with the guy, here's what I realized. The guy lives inside the loop, never visits his locations out in the suburbs, never even pays them much attention. And remember I said he's trying to remote control, thinking these things will run themselves? That's what was happening. He was an absentee owner. And if you're an absentee owner, it's never going to be successful. That was a good learning lesson for me when I was trying to get into this business, that you will never be successful in this business if you're going to make yourself an absentee owner. Good learning experience. Now, a lot of this information you're looking for, like the royalties, information about the operating model, is in this Bible called the Franchise Disclosure Document, and we'll come to that in a couple of slides. Okay. So I talked about, I referred to these business brokers. So you've got these business brokers. There are hundreds of them out there. Google them, you'll find them. Okay. I cannot say one is better than the other. They're all pretty good. What these guys done have basically, they've gone and aligned themselves with 1 or 2 brands in each business concept. They've got dozens and dozens of franchisors that they have aligned themselves with. And what these people will do when you connect with them, they'll ask you to undertake a data survey. And they're going to ask you about your skills, your education, your experience, your interests, the funds you have available. They'll do a pretty comprehensive data collection on you. And then they'll go away for 2 or 3 days, and then they'll come back to you with some business ideas. Now, I've seen a couple of engines that will actually automate this process for you, but then most of them will still do this in a manual process. And they'll call you up and say, look, I've looked at everything you've got done and said to me, and I think these 3 or 4 ideas are something you should consider. And in my experience, a couple of them will be some well-established ones, and they'll come back to you with 1 or 2 that are kind of out there and also sometimes worth considering. What you want to do in this process is you want to talk to 3 or 4. 3 or 4 brokers are worth connecting with. And what you'll find is they'll come back to you with a pattern of ideas. You'll say, all of these 4 guys have recommended these 2 concepts to me. Maybe there's some, it's like what they call the wisdom of the internet, right? When you poll enough of people, generally the most common answer is the right one, right? So over here, you'll find that the pattern sets in when you start talking to 3 or 4 brokers. But each of them will come back with one or two of these outlier concepts that are sometimes worth considering. So I'd say that a little credence. Once you've pinpointed that, then you can move forward to your due diligence, is what I was talking about earlier. But always remember, these brokers will try and point you in the direction of a very specific brand. Don't get taken in by that. Remember, they're trying to push you into the direction of a certain brand because that's where they have their contract, right? So that's something to be careful about. And then always consider multiple players in a certain target category, right? Okay, so you decided you want to start engaging with the franchisor. Here are the 2 or 3 good ideas and concepts. Right? So let me start calling up these franchisors. So what should you be looking at? Well, remember, when you're evaluating these franchisors, it's a 2-way process. They are evaluating you as well. Remember, they have dealt with hundreds of people like you. They're interviewing people like you on a daily basis. They're meeting with people like you at their headquarters on a weekly basis. So while you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you as well. They're trying to see whether you're going to toe the party line. They're going to see if you have the funds to do this. They don't want you to be a loose arrow in their portfolio or in their brand, right? First thing they should technically do is give you this uniform franchise offering circular that outlines their offer to you, what they're offering in the business, and also what kind of agreement they will ask you to take on. Many of them kind of short circuit that process and dive directly to this FDD. Of both of these, especially the FDD, is a very, very critical document in this process. It is an FTC, a Federal Trade Commission required document that has to be disclosed to you. It is a document that you are not only expected to receive, but you actually you are expected to sign and acknowledge that you received it. This is so critical that by law, even after you've got this document, if you say 3 days later, yes, franchisor, I'm ready to sign up with you, they can't sign you up. You have to have had this document with you for, I think, either 14 or 21 days. I need to check, but it's one of those 2 numbers before they can say, yes, sign the agreement, and you can now be a franchisee. This is how critical this document is. This document lays it all out. The operating model, who their people are, what kind of support they're going to give you. They're going to document every single franchise fee that they could charge. They're going to document what it costs to start things up, how you're going to start things up, what kind of agreements you're going to sign, everything, including what lawsuits they have pending against them. All of that is in this document.
Quick
What's
question,
interesting?
Hubert. Quick
Yes.
question, Hubert. As people are thinking about this, and as you went through the process, at what point did you kind of seek out legal counsel and have someone also then look at these agreements with you, or did you try to do it on your own, kind of as you were going through?
That was the next point I was going to make. You actually are not going to seek legal counsel here, guys. This is one set of documents. You're not going to bother about seeking legal counsel. Why? Because that contract is a take it or leave it contract. The first time I did seek legal counsel, I went to a guy who works with franchises, and you know what he said? Hubert, nothing you can change here, because this is the standard offer to every franchisee today. When you take on your next location, they're going to make you sign a new FDD for the new location, and that document is going to be a lot thicker than the previous one. Right? So it's a standard document that you have to adopt. And so you're not really going to take on. Now, you may take on legal counsel to tell you, hey, be aware of these points, but you're not going to be able to negotiate anything in that agreement. Okay. You're going to have to meet the management. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is also an FTC requirement. So you're going to go out there during times of COVID. Obviously, this is most likely happening virtually, but you're going to go out there and spend a day with them. You're going to press the flesh. You're going to talk to them. They'll schmooze you. And then invariably, if they've called you out there, they pretty much approved you, right? They'll make a big show. Oh, we'll let you know end of the day or tomorrow or day after whether you're approved. You're most likely going to get approved. So I won't sweat it. My first time I sweated it. Second or third time, I couldn't care less. Okay. So what are you going to look at? Well, I've already talked about much of this, right? You're going to look at how long have they been in business. Is this a franchisor that just started recently? I'll give you an example here. Talking to this franchisor, headquartered in Houston, very exciting idea and concept, and said, how many businesses, how many locations have you got? Well, we have signed 175 franchise contracts. Damn, that's pretty good. How long have you been doing this? Oh, 8 months. Wait a second. How many locations do you have open? One. Really? You've got one that's your own location. You've gone and signed 175 franchise locations. How the hell are you supporting these people? How are they ramping up? What sort of franchise are you? I think that's pretty irresponsible, right? That was my thinking. A lot of people obviously went and signed 175 contracts and opened up, and some of them did pretty well actually in that franchise, right? They said, hey, this was a ground floor opportunity. So I've cornered like some really good locations in Missouri City and Stafford and Sugar Land and all those places, and I'm doing well. So look at that. How long has this franchisor been in business? Because when they've been in business a long time, they have support system, they have good training, they have information on their intranet, they have good number of franchisees who are successful, whom you're going to learn from. Look at the number of locations in your locality. Is your market getting very saturated? That's a very critical thing to look at. What is their training and support? Is this partner, the franchisor, a dictator? Very critical. I'll give you an example here. Very often, a dictatorial franchisor will come to you and say, this is how you're going to have to do it. No ifs, ands, and buts. And you're going to say, you know what? I know my local market pretty well. And they're going to say, you're going to have to do it like this. Or they'll come back to you and say, you know what? We decided to change the flooring, or we decided to change the equipment, and you suddenly have to incur $50,000 expense. Some franchisors are very much like that. Others will partner with you and say, here's what we would suggest, but you know your market a lot better, so we'll let you be the ultimate decide on that front. Think about that as well. I talked about the franchise fees, network of franchisees. Does this present an opportunity for multiple locations if you need it? In the daycare business, in the staffing business, if you think you're going to make $500,000 to $1 million a year and that's good enough for you, then by all means, stick with it, right? But otherwise, stick with one location. If you think you need multiple locations, is there an opportunity for that? Okay, so invariably, when you're starting a franchise, you're going to start the business from the ground up. That's what most new franchisees do. But then oftentimes you get presented an opportunity to buy a franchise. And sometimes that's a really good opportunity. Why would you want to buy a franchise? Because, hey, you don't have to go through the growing pains of starting a franchise, right? You've got a quick start. You've got a business that's already making revenue. You don't have to sweat it out and say, damn, I need to build my revenue. You also save sometimes on franchise fees. Sometimes, when a franchisor takes on a new franchisee, your franchise fees take in a lot of the cost that the franchisor is going to incur up front to get you off the ground, to help you figure things out, to provide your training and your hand-holding. That's expensive for the franchisor. When you buy an existing business, they don't have to incur those fees. So sometimes the transfer fees actually are quite cheap. And then also, when you're buying an ongoing profitable business, you actually have to put in sometimes much lower down payment because the financier is willing to fund an ongoing business as a business acquisition rather than a startup franchise. I'll talk about that as well in a couple of slides. What are the downsides of acquiring an ongoing business? Well, obviously, no one's going to sell you the business out of the goodness of their heart, right, at a discount. They're going to charge you a premium for that. You're going to pay a pretty penny to acquire an ongoing business versus starting your own business. You may often have to acquire a business that is the turnaround situation. And turnarounds are not easy, guys, if you don't know what you're doing or if you don't know how to do it. And it end up being a money pit. And then, obviously, if you've never done this business before, you're going to have to hit the ground running, figuring out what needs to be done. And when you acquire a business that somebody else's business, where they may have a good relationship with the staff may say, we don't want to work with you. We don't like you. We don't like, we don't like the look of you. We don't want to work with you. And all of a sudden, you're scrambling looking for labor, right? So my guidance to you, if you're going to acquire a franchise business, do it if it is your second or third location once you figure out, or if you've done something similar in the past. Question from Sue over here: what's the best way to build network to receive coaching and help? Question sometimes we pointed out at the beginning. So if your question is about whether once you're in it, how do you go about it? it's gonna happen very easily. It's gonna happen when you do your due diligence. You're gonna go out there talking to franchisees in that system before you buy into it, right? And many franchisees have no qualms providing the right guidance. If you've got a lot of franchisees who are hesitant to talk to you, you may want to think twice about that franchise. In my experience, those are not good franchises, because if they've not nurtured this camaraderie, I really question how things are run over there. Right? So that will happen as you go about your due diligence process. You also meet them when you go to your annual, they invariably have regional conferences or annual conferences. Very often they will have local cooperatives, marketing cooperatives. It's a good place to go meet them as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but if not, ping me and we can talk about that later on. Okay, so if you're looking at something that's for sale, if it is a profitable one, well, that's because the owner wants to cash out, right? So as I said, expect to pay a premium for a successful business. But if you're buying a business that's struggling, you've really got to figure out why it's struggling. Is this struggling due to poor or mismanagement or absentee management? Is it struggling because it's a poor location? Sometimes if you got a business, they say, hey, success, a lot of local businesses is location, location, location. Well, guess what? A traffic pattern may have changed. New construction may have happened, right? Or the locality demographics have changed in the last 10 years, and that's why the location is kind of in a decline. Could be there's a franchisor repossession. A franchisee that's struggling may stop paying their dues, and a franchisor will come and seize that location and put it up for sale. By the way, those sometimes can be actually very good locations to buy, because you can buy them at a steep discount, and they are only repossessed not because they're bad locations, but they're bad management. So those are worth considering, in my opinion. There may be a limited market opportunity, either for your business or for expansion in that market, right? For example, the daycare business, you may have seen brands like Kids Are Kids or Primrose. If you go to them, you're not getting a new franchise, but you can buy an existing franchise from one of the existing owners. But if you want to expand, the opportunities are limited. The market is saturated for that brand. You may have gotten new competition, or you may have labor issues, right? So there are many, many reasons why a poorly managed franchise, or for that matter, any business is for sale. The onus is upon you to figure out why it's struggling. So how do you finance these locations, right? Well, the first thing is you're always going to have to put in some owner equity. The franchisor expects you to do that. If you are going to buy this outright, you're going to have to put in money, or if you're going to finance it, you're going to have to put in equity. Whether you're financing with the government or you're financing it through a bank, you're going to have to put in some of your own money. Typically, if you're buying a business that is cash flow positive, you may only need to put in 10% of the acquisition price. But if you're buying a business that's kind of more retail, if you're buying a business that's struggling, not only is it difficult to get it financed, but you're going to have to put in anywhere from 15 to 30% down as a down payment to get that financed. How much? As I told you, I've seen some franchisors that may have a franchise fee threshold of 10,000, but you may need to spend, 150, 200,000 building out the location. And if you got some bigger ones like a restaurant or a daycare, those expenses, those budgets are anywhere from, $3 to $5 or $6 million, right? A good franchisor will have aligned themselves with the right banks. So they're going to say, yep, you know what? We looked at your finances, all looks good. Here are the 3 banks we work with. And you go to the bank, and the bank may say, yep, you know what? This one, we're going to do an SBA loan. The SBA being the government, federal government, is one of the best kind of loans you can get out there. A very low interest rate, a very secure rate. And if you've got good collateral, like a real estate part of your business that collateralizes this deal, you can get deals that are amortized over 25-year terms. Okay, so it really helps with your cash flow break even. Alternatively, you can go to a bank. I had to acquire one business, which was not very expensive. I had a really good relationship with the bank, so much so that they actually funded me. When I went to them, they funded this loan in 3 days. Right? So you have the right banks, you can fund loans in 3 days. Worst case, you go to friends and family, right? Friends and family, especially if it's like a couple of 100,000, and you got, parents or siblings who may be able to loan the money, go to them, and you can really save that whole process and fees that may go with taking on loans. Here are some ideas. Here are ideas of the kinds of uh, you know businesses or franchises that I've seen tend to be pretty good. Somebody's asking, so where can you go and get these ideas? Screenshot on the right is from franchise.com. Big surprise, right? Franchise.com is a very good place to go to. But I can tell you, the government, the SBA, the VA, the Veterans Affairs Department, and are very good sites to go to. Entrepreneurship.com has some good information. But if you just Google franchising, there are some fabulous franchise sites out there, franchise helps and franchise broker, and you name it. Come up with any word attached to franchise, and you'll find some very good information out there. So to answer the question that was asked a few minutes ago, there are tons and tons of sites out there that will provide very, very good information, not just on what franchising is about, but will also provide you with very good summaries or synopsises as to what's a good franchise, how much does it cost, what do they look for, how much do you need to put in, what kind of network you need to have, what kind of territories they're right now signing up with. There's tons of information out there. In fact, in my opinion, there is a data overload of information out there, which is why I say think about a franchise broker to help you sort through this process and sift through this whole process of trying to figure this out for yourself. Okay, and with that, let's open it up to questions.
Well, as people start to get some questions, and we'll ask them to start pinging them.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if we can unmute everybody in this process.
Yeah, I'll ask Sammy.
Maybe turn on cameras or something like that if we want to.
If they want to ask a question. Well, Sammy does that. Kind of as you were going into this process, Hubert, what was your thought process of, do I get into a franchise versus just buying an existing business? Let's say in education, how did you analyze that? Some of the analysis is the same, right?
So I didn't. I happened upon my first one, your trading room, because I loved their idea. What they were doing basically is, foreign exchange, it's 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, 5.5 days a week. Because foreign exchange trading starts off when the markets open up in Australia, and then Tokyo, London, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they close when New York closes on Friday evening. And I loved it because it's something I could do any time of the day. But your trading room ran a live trading room where they had live professional traders in the room who did the trading, and you would watch them and say, oh, all I have to do is follow them and copy their trades to be successful. Mm-hmm. It was very easy concept, and they had softwares that would help you set things up and predict to a certain extent with a very, very high probability, there's no assurance, what a trade would do, right? And you could be successful doing that. So selling that idea to people was not difficult. They had something called prop trading, where you basically trade. If you don't have funds, they lend you the funds to do that. And our customers were very successful, right? Tons of customers taking home after a year in our business between $10,000 to $50,000 a month. Not bad. Good business to be in when you're sitting at home and doing this on the side. So that's the reason. So when they came in, my business partner and I, we found out that they didn't come to us. We found out that they were offering local franchise opportunities. We just jumped on it. Right? We jumped on it, and Texas being so large, they were only selling half territories in Texas. We couldn't afford to buy the whole territory. We bought half the territory. Right?
We got another question here quickly too. Let me kind of interrupt you. What about, someone's got a question on the franchise broker fees?
Never ask his question.
Sorry, say that again, Amy. What
the franchise broker fees, right? And then how do you evaluate?
You don't pay franchise broker fees. The franchise brokers get paid by the franchisor. If a franchise broker is going to charge you fees, move on to the next one, guys.
But the key thing is, as you're dealing with that broker, you have to understand that they're not putting your interest. They don't have that fiduciary responsibility to you. They're there to push the other
Correct.
side. Right?
That's what I was saying. Remember, they are brokers on behalf of the franchisor.
Okay. You have any
Okay.
other questions? Share some. Share some. Examples where people made some mistakes, right? Of getting in. Where do people go wrong in this? There's some common pitfalls, right?
Yeah. I mean, pitfalls, as I said, trying to be an absentee owner, counting your chickens before they're hatched, not willing to put in the effort, or not willing to learn, thinking you're smart. I can tell you, okay, I'm not a dummy. Problem is that people like me go into this business thinking we're smarter than the people who've already figured this out. And you learn the hard way that the most successful franchisees are the ones who followed the system. I can tell you, when you're interviewing with a franchisor, learn those words. They ask you, what do you see? I see myself following the system, and that's it. You're done. I mean, you don't say anything else. They're going to sign you up on the spot. But you'll have to learn, accept that. You have to learn to actually believe it and do that. Yes, you may be a smart person, but you got to be smart enough to realize you need to follow the system. Number one pitfall.
Come on, guys. I'm sure people have got some questions. Hubert will give you a very direct.
People are still here.
Response. Yeah.
Almost no one has dropped off.
Yes. It says,
unless the stuff I gave them was so overwhelming that they're waiting for it to percolate and then have the questions. Okay, will you be sharing this recording? Yes, this recording will be sent out, right, Samia?
Yes, we will be sending it out.
What was the most difficult thing? What do you think it is in terms of the financing aspect, right? Because that is a big hurdle for some people. I know whether even if you start your own business and get an SBA loan, you have to go through some of the very same processes here, right? And
Yeah.
Getting,
Here's the funny thing. Yeah, it's a very valid question. It's the fear. So I was talking to one of our very, very successful franchisees. Okay. Now you realize the daycare business is kind of on the higher end of what it costs to get into franchising, right? You're going to have to put in several hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash, but you're also taking on millions of dollars of debt in the process. Of course, the debt is securitized, against your asset building, right? I was talking to one of our franchisees who was not by any means, he was quite wealthy. And he said to me, Hubert, when I opened the first location, I jumped in it, didn't think twice about it, put in the money, and we were successful. But when it came time to open my second business, I was so scared to write that check. I didn't know if I was going to replicate that success. Now, that time, I felt I had nothing to lose because I had all this energy and excitement. But the second one, now I had something more to lose. And could it be a money pit? You know what I said about those owners who came to me and said, our first two locations, we were taking out tons of money. We built our dream home and did all this. Then we opened our third and fourth location. We were taking home collectively less money than we were making with two locations.
Exactly. Oh, you have some interesting ones here. Sue again asked, which one did you find more challenging? The currency trading or owning and managing your franchise? Let's pick your educational business.
Completely different businesses. They are completely different businesses. With trading, I believed in it. I mean, I believe in all my businesses, and I'll tell you one about the Huntington one as well. Very interesting story, right? I believe in it. I was using it on a day-to-day basis, and so it was an interesting one to sell, but people were kind of skeptical about it. The daycare business is different because I actually don't do the selling anymore. My managers do that. The thing is, when you build a good reputation, people come to it automatically. The number one brand in the daycare business in Texas is a company called Primrose. And I tell my managers, when somebody walks into our facility, you still have to sell them and convince them to join us. When they walk into Primrose, they've already decided they're going there. All they're doing is going and validating their decision to go over there. Building that reputation really matters. Now let's talk about Huntington. In Huntington, you have to sell a pretty expensive product. You have to convince people to start with $5,000 to $10,000 up front. Unlike Kuman and Mathanasium, where they'll charge you about $300 a month, pretty much the rest of your life or your child's school-going years, in Huntington, it's a very different model. You charge them thousands of dollars up front. And my staff were hesitating. My business partner was struggling to sell. And I went to them and I said, think about it. I said, think of the one industry where they sell you a big ticket item you really don't need. That industry is the timeshare business. You'll go in there and they will do this amazing presentation. And they'll sell you a $30,000 product you really don't need. And you'll walk out and say, damn, what did I buy? How do I get out of it? And it's very difficult to get out of it. I said, now let me ask you about our business in Huntington. Do you think we add value? They said, are you kidding? We see this on a daily basis. We change children's lives. We take them from the 6th grade kid functioning at the 2nd grade level, and we bring them up to the 6th grade level. We see how their lives change. We see how their confidence goes up, and it takes all the stress out of their parents' lives. I said, so you believe in it, right? So why the hell can't you go and sell a $10,000 product? Because it is changing their lives. The key thing I'm trying to get across is when you're in your own business, in this franchise business, often you have to learn to be a really good salesperson. It comes from belief in your business.
So let's tag that into another question that's come up is, because I like the question. What do you suggest for minimizing the risk of failure, right?
Actually, if you don't mind, can I take them chronologically? There's one here about hotels.
You want to jump to hotels? We can do that.
Jump
about the hotels,
I'll just take
like
the hotel business. You know, the hotel business, to me, is really a landlord real estate business. Very rarely are you going to be an operator of a hotel business. My guidance to you, if you haven't done it, don't do it. It's a very, very tough business to be in, right? Most hotels are actually managed by the hotel brand, especially if you're a Marriott, it's managed by the brand, right? You end up being a landlord. Now, if you decide you want to run this business, I don't know, guys, you know, because at the end of the day, in my experience, and don't quote me on this, but whatever little I've done in terms of looking at hotels, these hotels tend to, you're making more of your money, I think, from the real estate than from the cash flow. Now, in the last few years before COVID, hotels were doing fabulously well. You know, this is not meant to be a bigoted or racist kind of comment, but the fact is that if your last name doesn't end in Patel or Shah, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't be in that business, because 40% of this, there's a reason why 40% of this country's motels and hotels are owned by the Indian community, especially in the Gujarati community. It takes a certain skill set. It takes a certain mindset to run these things very successfully. I couldn't run one of these successfully, I'll tell you that. But a lot of my friends who do own them, they know how to run them very successfully. And a lot of them are Shahs and Patels. Next question is, you talked about this over the slides. What steps and timelines for today to opening the doors? Rule of thumb, it takes at least a year to a year and a half. The biggest chunk of time is actually finding that right location and the build out and opening. If you're fortunate enough to find a location that needs to be rebranded, then great. But otherwise, getting your land, getting approvals from the county to build and to do the build out, and then it takes a minimum of a year to a year and a half. Okay.
And then going to the risk question, I think it was tied to that too.
Yeah. And what do you suggest? Minimizing the risk of failure? Well, the very fact that you're going into a franchise straight away significantly reduces your risk of failure. Remember, I talked about the fact that most businesses in this country have a 90+ failure rate. If you're a food business, it's a 98%+ failure rate. By virtue of just going to a franchise, going through the process of being reviewed by them and being approved by them, you straight away cut down your loss or your chance of failure. Why? Because you're not going to be able to open a location they have fully vetted it on your behalf. Okay. If a franchisor approves you without seeing the location, not a franchisor to be involved with. Those franchises need to get their butts out to your location, or they need to have a local person who understands your local market better than you do, who's going to say, yes, you know what, this location is good. It's got the right demographics. It's got the right growth potential. It's got the right economics for you. I think this is a good location. You know, my first children's lighthouse, the CEO of that location, he gave me a very, very important lesson. Sadly, he is no more. He said, Hubert, stand on that land and look around with the plans in your hand and picture what this locality is going to look like 7 years from now. My first location, that's exactly what we did. There was nobody where we were. There was one church. And I looked around and I said, I'm looking at the growth plans. And in 5 years' time, there are going to be 10,000 houses around here with these roads and these stores. Guess what? It wasn't 5 years. It was 3 years by the time that happened. Very important, good lesson he taught me over there.
Let's see if there's any more here before we have to close out. Any other questions? How about going back to the partners, right? You know, I'm picking the partners. What will be kind of your top qualities to look for if you decided you had to go out and find a partner to do a franchise?
I think I talked about the first thing being implicit trust.
Yeah.
Okay. Find someone who is going to complement your skill set. Find someone who is willing to work as hard as you will. And then clearly define the roles. So for me, for example, in some of my locations, my business partner says, I'm going to be the day-to-day manager of our location. I will handle staffing decisions. I will handle making sure the facility is running right. And I said, great. My job is all the finances, all the supplies, maintenance, all those things are my responsibility. And I am lazy. I've learned to be very efficient to be able to do all of that on my computer and a phone.
I love the next question. It ties into that. They're asking you about a prenup, right? Kind of your thoughts on developing that partnership agreement. Right?
Absolutely. By all means, do that. Okay, you may not go to be so extreme as a prenup, but I have simple agreements in place with all my business partners. It's not verbal. You have to put it in writing. Why? Because you don't trust them. Mainly because what that does, it lays down the expectations to make sure that all of you partners are on the same page. All of you have the same expectations of what your business should be doing and what you want to get out of your business. It also lays the groundwork for, hey, if we have a conflict, how are we going to deal with it? If we have disagreements, how are we going to deal with it? And to allow the business, for example, a very simple agreement with my partners. If you're going to spend up to $2,500, spend it. No questions asked. But if you are going to spend $2,500 or more, then let's get together and talk about it. Why? Not because I don't trust you, but mainly because maybe there are an alternative we can consider, right? I've never said no to my business partners when the expense is more than that. If you've said no, it's mainly because, hey, you know what? I did a similar thing in one of my other locations. I have a better price. Let's use that. That's the only time I may say no to my business partners.
I think those are all really good points because I've seen it also on partnerships where, you may have one partner that's spending more time in the business, but then when it comes time maybe you have to do a capital injection, sometimes these feelings will come up and they say, well, wait a minute, why should I have to contribute half? I'm the one spending more time in the business, right? Because you haven't had these open.
And I do have clauses like that should one partner be spending much more time than the other in the business, then we can take some time and discuss maybe doing a little bit of a management draw. Yeah. That's one clause. I think other clause is also exit clauses. If one partner decides to get out of the business, what will be the conditions and terms? Or what will be the conditions and terms where you collectively decide to sell the business?
Or what happens if they get married to someone you don't like and they decide they want to participate? I mean, these things happen.
Yeah.
These life events happen. right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think, we have to thank Hubert for his time. He's got a vast amount of experience. We've definitely enjoyed it. We're going to, I think, post it. And then
Right.
I think,
I'm,
Sammy,
I'm,
I'd
I'm
like to,
going to type my email here
oh, perfect.
for guys, for people who have more questions. Bear with me. Bear with me. This font doesn't lend itself well. Okay. So here's my email. It will be in the recording. Ping
And
me.
then we'll throw it
If
into
you've
the
got
chat.
questions, ping me. I'm
Yeah.
always available to provide input guidance on this and other business opportunities.
Yes, Hubert will. And then I like to then pass it back to Samia, who's our executive director for Houston Thai, and that she can just quickly close this out and show one of our upcoming events. I think it's going to be a really good one. I think we've got a moderator. I think Ashok Rao is going to be moderating the next session. So I'll pass it off to you, Samia.
Thank you, Hubert and Amy, for a great session. I'm sure our audience has really enjoyed listening to you. We will be sharing the recording with everybody who's attended today. Our next webinar is on April 20th at 4 p.m. It's called Thought on Economics, Conversations with Remarkable People Shaping Our Century. So we hope you'll join us for that. And thank you again for your time. And thank you for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.